Christmas dinner, my uncle said, women shouldn't vote. 6 women sat frozen around Grandma Eleanor's dining table, forks halfway to mouths, while Lawrence leaned back with that smug grin he'd perfected over the past year of falling down internet rabbit holes. I'm serious, he continued, scrolling through his phone. Women vote with emotion instead of logic. That's why society's collapsing. My mother's knife was still pressed against her turkey, and I watched her knuckles go white. She'd just spent 3 months in DC lobbying Congress, but apparently Lawrence hadn't noticed. Or worse, he had noticed and picked this exact moment for maximum impact. Grandma Eleanor set down her fork with a soft clink that somehow silenced the room more effectively than a gunshot. At 89, she'd survived the Depression, World War II, and apparently infinite patience for male stupidity. But I could see that patience evaporating in real time. Lawrence, she said in that deceptively sweet voice that meant someone was about to get destroyed, remind me what you do for a living? The trap was so obvious I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. I'm between positions. The tech industry's pushing out qualified men for diversity hires. He was already defensive, already making excuses, and still hadn't realized he was standing in a minefield. Grandma smiled, and it was terrifying. So, you're unemployed and living in Patricia's guest house. The guest house that your wife owns because she's been a successful real estate agent for 30 years? My cousin Nina had her phone out under the table, and when she caught my eye, she mouthed, recording this. Smart kid. Lawrence's wife Patricia had gone completely still, staring at her plate like she was doing complex mental mathematics. Their daughter Nina was a resident in emergency medicine, and I watched her face shift from shock to something colder as she realized her father had just suggested she shouldn't have basic rights. My sister Vivian laughed, but it wasn't kind. Let me understand this correctly. You think the 6 women at this table, a congressional lobbyist, a surgeon, a federal judge, a biochemistry PhD, a real estate mogul, and the founder of a pharmaceutical company are too emotional to vote, while you, currently unemployed and living off your wife, are the rational one? She counted us off on her fingers, and Lawrence's face went pale. That's when Aunt Helena, the federal judge who rarely spoke at family gatherings, set down her napkin and fixed Lawrence with a look that probably made lawyers cry in her courtroom. Lawrence, I've listened to your increasingly problematic opinions for 3 years because Patricia asked us to be patient, but you just stated in front of witnesses that half the population shouldn't have democratic rights. That crosses every line. Her voice was measured, judicial, and somehow more terrifying than screaming. Lawrence tried to backtrack with that classic move of saying something horrific and then claiming misunderstanding when consequences appeared. I didn't mean it like that. There's scientific evidence about hormones and decision-making. Grandma Eleanor cut him off with a hand wave that carried the weight of 89 years of taking exactly zero shit from anyone. I was born in 1935. I heard the same arguments you're making now, just with different words. She stood up, all 4 feet 11 inches, radiating more authority than Lawrence could dream of possessing. I started my pharmaceutical company in 1962, when banks wouldn't give women business loans without male co-signers. That company now employs 200 people and generates $30 million annually. Grandma walked around the table slowly, and everyone watched like she was delivering a verdict. The blood pressure medication you take every morning? My lab created it. Your cholesterol treatment? Mine. The antidepressant you think nobody knows about? My team developed it 15 years ago. Lawrence went completely white. Patricia was staring at her mother-in-law with an expression I couldn't read, but it was shifting towards something harder by the second. So when you sit at my table, eating food purchased with money earned by women, in a house owned by a woman, taking medications developed by women, and suggest women shouldn't vote, Grandma paused for effect. I have to wonder what exactly you think would happen if we'd listened to men like you. You'd probably be dead from untreated hypertension. My mother spoke up, and her voice had shifted from cold to something resembling pity, which was somehow worse. Lawrence, men who are secure in their worth don't need to diminish women to feel important. What you're describing isn't philosophy, it's insecurity dressed up as intellectualism. Vivian added clinical precision like she was diagnosing a patient. You're a textbook case of digital extremism pipeline. I literally wrote my dissertation on this. Lawrence slammed his hand on the table, making china rattle. And that's when things took a turn I never expected. The rest of the story is linked below, or on my channel.